Hi there, welcome back to Echo Avenue. Let me ask you something real today. Have you ever looked at your life and wondered why nothing is changing? You try to do better. You make promises. You start strong. But somehow, you keep circling back to the same habits, the same mistakes, the same emotional weight. It's like your life is on repeat, and no matter how hard you try to move forward, something always pulls you back. Sound familiar? You're not alone. Because the truth is, millions of people feel stuck every single day. But what if I told you it's not because you're lazy, or broken, or unlucky? What if the real reason is something deeper, something you can finally change? Let's talk about the hidden reasons you're still stuck, and how to finally, truly, break free. James wasn't lazy. In fact, he spent most of his days exhausted, not from effort, but from overthinking. His mornings started with a plan. Lists. Alarms. Color-coded notebooks filled with goals. But deep down, he was stuck in the cycle of preparing to change, without actually changing. He watched every motivational video he could find, read books on self-discipline, even downloaded apps to track habits. But nothing ever stuck. Because here's what most people miss. Being busy is not the same as being productive. James was working hard, but on the wrong things. He avoided the uncomfortable tasks. He skipped the real inner work. And so his progress was just surface level. The more he tried to escape discomfort, the more it controlled him. The truth. Growth doesn't come from convenience. It comes from facing the exact things you've been running from. There's a strange safety in staying stuck. That sounds odd, but it's true. James knew his habits were hurting him. He knew staying quiet in meetings, saying yes when he meant no, procrastinating important things, all of it was keeping him small. But still, he stayed. Why? Because letting go meant facing the unknown. And even though his current life was painful, it was familiar. And for many people, familiar pain feels safer than unfamiliar freedom. He feared change not because he couldn't handle it, but because he didn't know who he'd be on the other side of it. So he stayed in toxic friendships. Kept repeating patterns. Kept trying to fix the same broken things, hoping they'd magically work this time. But life doesn't change until you do. And James would soon learn that true freedom means being willing to leave behind everything that no longer serves your peace, even if it hurts. The biggest lie James believed was this: I'll start when I'm ready. He kept waiting for confidence. For clarity. For a sign. But none of that ever came. Days became weeks. Weeks became months. Until one night, something snapped. It wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic. It was quiet. He looked at himself in the mirror and realized he didn't even recognize the person staring back. And that's when the truth hit him: readiness doesn't come before action. It comes after. He didn't need to feel brave to begin. He needed to begin to feel brave. That next morning, James did one small thing he'd been avoiding for years. He showed up early to a class. He turned off his phone. He talked to someone he usually ignored. And for the first time, he didn't explain himself. He just acted. That single day became the start of his transformation. Not because it was perfect, but because it was real. Here's another reason we stay stuck: we let the wrong people have power over our lives. James constantly doubted himself because of the voices he let in. Friends who mocked his dreams. Family who told him to be realistic. Social media that fed him lies about instant success. The more he listened, the smaller he felt. Until he realized that his life was being designed by people who didn't have to live it. So he stopped sharing his goals with those who didn't support them. He unfollowed people who made him feel behind. He turned down the volume on external opinions, and turned up the volume on his own instincts. And slowly, things changed. His vision became clearer. His actions became bolder. His confidence came, not from praise, but from proof. Because when you stop asking for permission, you start creating your own direction. And that's when the real freedom begins. Breaking free doesn't come with fireworks. It doesn't happen overnight. And it certainly doesn't come neatly packaged in a single, perfect morning routine. For James, it started as a quiet rebellion. A whisper that said, no more. No more trying to be who others expected him to be. No more pretending he was okay with being stuck. No more waiting for the right time, the right mood, the right motivation. Change didn't knock on his door with a smile. It came as a storm, messy, unpredictable, necessary. At first, his days didn't look very different. But something had shifted beneath the surface. Where he used to scroll mindlessly, he now paused to ask himself, what am I avoiding right now? Where he used to talk himself out of opportunities, he now leaned into the discomfort. He signed up for things before he felt ready. He walked into rooms where he once felt small. He dared to make eye contact when his instinct was to look away. These weren't big wins, but they were real ones. And each small win added a brick to the foundation of the life he was building. James stopped talking about his goals. Not because he didn't believe in them, but because he no longer needed applause to validate them. He began to trust quiet progress. He began to respect slow, intentional growth. And perhaps most importantly, he began to enjoy his own company. That was something he had never done before. For most of his life, silence felt like a punishment. Now, it felt like a gift. In that silence, he heard his own voice again. The one that had been buried beneath years of noise, distraction, and doubt. People started to notice something different. He wasn't louder. He wasn't boastful. He wasn't suddenly successful in the way most people define it. But his presence changed. He walked with clarity. Spoke with confidence. Not the kind of confidence that shouts to be heard, but the kind that doesn't need to speak at all. He began to attract people, not because he was chasing them, but because he had stopped chasing altogether. He had become magnetic by simply being grounded. His energy shifted. His priorities aligned. He stopped explaining himself because he no longer needed to justify his boundaries, his time, or his dreams. But here's the part no one talks about. Breaking free can be lonely. Because not everyone is meant to walk with you once you begin to rise. James lost some people along the way. Friends who only understood the version of him that played small. Family members who were uncomfortable with his boundaries. But he also gained something far more valuable, peace. The kind of peace that doesn't come from approval, but from alignment. He was no longer living a life that drained him. He was building one that fed him. And as he stood on that unfamiliar path, surrounded by fewer people but filled with more purpose, he realized something powerful. Being stuck had taught him how to stand still. But breaking free had taught him how to move with intention. Every day wasn't perfect. Some days still hurt. Some days he still doubted. But he kept going. Not because he was fearless, but because he had learned to act despite fear. And now I ask you, what's keeping you stuck? Is it fear? Is it comfort? Is it the weight of other people's expectations? Whatever it is, know this, you're not alone. We all have our version of stuck. But staying there is a choice. And so is breaking free. The moment you stop waiting to feel ready, the moment you stop needing everything to be perfect, that's when it begins. So start. Not tomorrow. Not next Monday. Not when things are calmer. No. Take the first step, however small. Delete the thing you've been avoiding. Say no when you mean no. Speak the truth you've been silencing. Move. Act. Live. Because the chains that hold you aren't always visible. They're made of fear, self-doubt, guilt, and old stories you keep telling yourself. But once you stop feeding those stories, they lose their grip. And once you start writing new ones, everything begins to shift. You don't need a complete plan. You don't need to have it all figured out. You just need to begin. And the rest. It will meet you on the way. James didn't become someone new. He simply uncovered who he always was. And so can you. So here's your sign. Your permission. Your reminder. You're not stuck. You're just standing still. Now, walk forward.